there are three things we're going to talk about. The first thing is what was Tama's takeaways from Waitangi, what thoughts he had around Te Tiriti, especially that was how it was impacting within the government he was in, and Chewie, the fast tracking, his thoughts around that. So they're the three things we're going to cover off for tonight. And this is the first question. And the reason I wanted to show this question is really there's two things in here. The first one is the pause. At one point, just watch for that pause that Moana does. He answers the question and she just pauses. And you can just see in her head, she's going, that sounds like a load of bullshit to me. And then she vocalized it in a much more professional way than I just said right then. Also, the question avoidance around the referendum and does he argue with David Seymour? It's the one question he then didn't answer. And you'll notice at that part of the question, what he brought out, Chewie, was what I would say, which is now a trope that they've got off their hairless leader and is now going around all of them. I don't know if you've noticed this, people, but all of these ministers are saying what I would say to you is, or what I would say is, and it's come straight from, I'm not saying it's come from him as in he's told them to do it, but this is what happens with leaders. Like you'll see if like a leader to a group or a church or a business has a moustache, all of a sudden these men will start popping up with moustaches all over the place. There is a mimicry which comes with leadership. And these guys are starting doing it to Luxon by using the same phraseology as he uses. So let's have a look at this first clip. And this first clip is Moana asking about his takeaways from Waitangi.
What was the key message you took from Waitangi?
The number one thing that maybe a couple of things that I see across those hui is an absolute focus and appetite for Māori for kotahitanga and the fabric of kotahitanga or unity to shine through in our country, Aotearoa, New Zealand. And what that means is not everyone must be the same, but we all have our own diverse iwi, our own diverse communities, our own diverse
aspirations. Might want to bring that up with David.
Within a kotahitanga fabric that's based on whakapapa and whanaungatanga foundations.
So I went to those hui too. There was a lot of kotahitanga and was mainly against the government.
Yes, for sure. And I think that's an impression that many people will have. But there's an aspiration that our whanaunga, our whānau, our hapu, our iwi and hapori have for that kotahitanga to encompass everybody in New Zealand.
Yeah, I'm still trying to understand your point there, because one of the big issues, of course, is the Treaty Principles Bill that's been championed by ACT. You were appointed a treaty settlement negotiator, so you know about the treaty. So do you end up having debates with David Seymour?
So there's the question, yeah? Do you push back against Seymour? That's the question, and this is the question he doesn't answer.
Saying, no, hang on, what you're attempting to do here is to redefine the principles and therefore redefine the treaty.
As I said earlier on, the Treaty Te Tiriti o Waitangi is foundational for our country. That's my view.
It's not the question.
I think it's the view of many people, both Māori.
Is it the view of your party?
Oh, I think it is. And if you review our constitution, you'll see that Te Tiriti o Waitangi, or the Treaty of Waitangi, is acknowledged as the founding documents of Aotearoa New Zealand.
There's no risk whatsoever that that bill will go beyond that select committee?
No, what I would say is that our Prime Minister has made several statements over the last couple of months that a referendum would be very unhelpful, that we are supportive as the National Party for the bill to be drafted by the ACT Party to be taken through to first reading in the Select Committee.
Given your background and all you know, would that be a bottom line for you?
I'm very clear on my views on the place and space of Te Tiriti o Waitangi and the Treaty of Waitangi in our society, past, present and future. And I'm willing to have a very reasoned and professional debate about that.
So, question number one, Chewie. It's a really interesting dynamic watching Moana with Tama, because on some level I get the sense that she's been quite respectful of him and he's been quite respectful on her. Probably a Māori thing going on there, that I don't sense that if it was like a David Seymour or a Chris Luxon would be the same kind of genteel, polite. She's always polite, but there was she didn't, you watched the whole thing as well, tell me, I didn't feel her really go in at any stage and just really nail that down. Because, man, it's like the great question, do you push back against Seymour? Not really answered. Tell me again, what happens around, how does he get to say these things? How does he get to represent this issue with Māoridom within your government? You know what I mean? It was like, it was very polite and genteel, and that's Moana style, right? Polite and genteel sort of conversation with lots of good information though. Your thoughts?
It's one of the things, and again, just to hammer it home, I do urge people to go and watch this whole interview. It's really, really interesting. One of the things that I love about Moana's interviewing style, as you've mentioned, is generally quite gentle and respectful. But what she doesn't say could fill a book.
Yeah,
those spaces, those pauses are just devastating, and you don't see that a lot with interviewers because they're trying to rush or really hammer on, answer the question, which I also enjoy. But sometimes just sitting there and going, like, as you would have. So if you were talking to someone and they just said something completely out of pocket and you went, really? do you want to expand on that? It's just devastating. I think, when Tama went, oh, what I'd say to you is this, and then a whole lot of fluff and burble about Te Tiriti. What an excellent opportunity he missed to just go, when this comes up to select committee or whatever, I am going to vote against it.
Yeah, of course.
I'm going to actively vote against it. But he didn't.
Some people, I got a message from someone, because I don't know if you saw the write-up for this show, and I said in the write-up something like the Minister for Everything Māori, and some people going, oh, that's a little bit rude, but the reason I said that is, let me show you right here. This is actually the show notes for Te Ao with Moana. It says, here's the Minister for Everything Māori. Well, almost National Minister Tama Potaka. So I kind of stole it off them. So just so you know, if you're wondering about my little bit of an edgy sort of a jibe there, it's
it's very true. Like, I mean, I have seen him speak, and there's chunks of that interview where I go, cool, I agree, 100%. That's I'm enjoying hearing this from you, and then I go, hang on, what party are you with?
Yeah, that's the point. Like, he says things you agree with, but you know that they're not going to have any influence. In fact, one of the questions we're not asking, not showing tonight, was that, I've got all my notes here, sorry, was that exact question where she asked, who decides who gets the resource? She asked about institutional and colonial racism. She asked about how much influence do you have? And that's what you're saying. He might be saying the right things and he might be having the right answers, but if that doesn't then flow into legislation with his government, then for want of a better word, he's just something to hold up and say, see, we're there as well.
Yeah, I've seen him speak on stuff, and I, as Kiwi Bird in the chat says, I don't hate him.
No.
But certainly when he was stood up at Waitangi, I just felt like he was like, right, let's get our guy out there, take some flack, and he spoke well there as well. But I just can't jive with the things that he's saying with the things that the rest of his party is saying, and the rest of the coalition partners are saying.
Yeah.
I'd be like, if you believe this, man, and this is what you're dealing with from your side, I'd be fuming. I'd be throwing chairs through doors. This is why I'm not a politician. Very hard to work with.
Well, she did actually ask him at one stage something about the mongrel. Have you got the mongrel in you? So maybe they do need a few more chairs thrown through doors. I mean, they're looking for extra work for the public servants, fixing a couple of doors on the 7th floor. The 9th floor, that might be right. All right, let's have a look at another part of the conversation where they were talking specifically around Te Tiriti. And as you say, Chewie, lots of the things that are said are the right thing. They're on the right page of the book. But then think about, now, how does that translate to the cabinet? And what do we hear about that when it comes out the mouths of the likes of David Seymour?
Do you believe Māori ceded tino rangatiratanga?
No, we never ceded tino rangatiratanga. That's why it's preserved up in Article 2, or Whatutuarua, of the Treaty of Waitangi. And I know there's a lot of other documents as well that reinforce that sense of tino rangatiratanga, and also the movement that we talk about being mana motuhake.
How relevant is Te Tiriti now in 2024 when we are dealing with public sectors, when we're dealing with health, with justice, with education? So
someone who is bilingual, someone who has that passion for the Māori language, for te reo. And now this is the government getting rid of te reo in the public sector. So this is what I'm saying. His answer is not going to be the wrong answer, but then you have to attach that to who he is speaking on behalf of. And like you said, Chewie, he could say I'm going to vote against this, but in some ways he can't, because a part of the rules within cabinet is you have to vote with. You can't walk across the floor unless it's a conscious vote. So,
is it relevant?
I think it's more relevant than any time before, because I think that we're in a position.
So if it's more relevant than any time before, why is your party getting rid of it? So this is the disconnect.
As a country, to really gather around the ultimate aka matua of Te Tiriti o Waitangi, which is kotahitanga. That isn't for just for Māori, but that's for everybody. But ultimately, Māori are fundamental, Te Tiriti are fundamental to Aotearoa New Te Rene, is, was, and will be.
I know you've only been in here for 5 minutes, but when your kids, come here for your valedictory speech, what do you want to say to them?
I've tried to be the best Māori I can be and the best New Zealander I can be. And I can only be the best New Zealander I can be if I'm the best Māori I can be.
And what does being Māori in this place look like?
Is making sure that our identity is not only preserved, but it also evolves over time, and that we are acknowledged, or we are set as a fundamental part of the country's future.
How do you fight?
That's an interesting one, eh? We are set as a fundamental part of the future with a government who's trying to denounce your special place in this country and make you no different from the Canadian migrant that just came here. So what he's saying sounds right. What his government's doing is incongruent with this conversation that he's putting out there.
For that?
Well, I think people feel traumatised and people feel vulnerable, and that for me is a message that I must be a more strong advocate and contributor to Māori success.
It's been 2 years since we had our one and only conversation with the Prime Minister.
Oh, right.
Do you think you could put a word in for us with your boss?
I've put it all with his team.
Yeah, we'll just leave that one in there for the end. There's one more clip to come, but this is the vibe we're getting, and Chewie, you're saying it as well. It's like what he's saying, there's lots you'll agree with. What his government that he's a part of and a minister in is doing doesn't align with the words we're hearing. And that's a problem. And that means, this is a horrible term to use, but he comes across as a bit of a token Māori, because it's like we'll hold him up, but here he is. Now what impact can he have? Oh, none. Now, nothing he says is going to be taken into account. That's how it feels. Maybe I'm wrong, but if all those words he was saying in this interview were taken on board by the government, they wouldn't be doing the things that they're doing. And through this interview, one of the things that was frustrating is half the time, and Moana pointed it out as well, he was basically saying, well, we can't do it. I'm paraphrasing, but we can't do anything about it because that was a coalition position agreement. So we had to agree to those terms and conditions. Like, well, dude, Mr. Luxon, if you open the door, you own it. Sorry, you can't. That's not a defence. Before we go to this last clip, Chewie, is there anything you want to add in?
I just want to circle back to that excellent question of like, what is it to be Māori in this place? Yeah. And I don't know if I'm just completely out of order here because I'm Pākehā. I don't know. But what I would think with the challenges that Māori have with how they have been treated and how the treaty is treated and how the government has done so much over so long to minimize Māori and minimize that treaty and that sort of thing, is you have to be big. You have to fight so much harder because the deck is stacked against you.
Yeah.
And that's what I would want to say. And like, even if his, like we talk about, you can appreciate why someone is on the other side of the argument, so why someone's on the right while we're on the left. There are clear and acknowledgeable reasons for doing that, and someone can argue those points, right? And that applies to Māori just the same as it does everywhere else. But he should be, in my opinion, making as much noise and ruckus for things that are important to Māori on the right that the Māori Party are doing and the Green Party are doing for issues for Māori on the left. And he's not. I mean, he's very new, but that shouldn't stop him either. There are a lot of of new Māori MPs that are making a lot of noise, and like, if they're not going to give you space, then take it. Start throwing elbows. You know, force your way to the front. Like, we've had over 100 years of finding out what white people want for this country. You know, don't be apologetic for it. Go for it. I, like, as a white guy, I want to see it. I want to know. It won't bleed through by itself. I won't find it unless you're screaming it and making me understand it. Well, either side of the aisle that you are.
I think that's completely right. You're spot on. There's one chat here that I will highlight before we go on to the fast track conversation, and that's coming from Gold. Gold just says out of the blue, I heard this somewhere, David Seymour is apparently the worst human example of a human being. Sounds about right. Thank you for the super chat, Gold. It's just, he heard that somewhere. I'm not sure where Gold heard that, but he heard it and he just wanted to pass it on.
Strange, interesting.
Okay, last clip we've got from Moana, and as I said, to be honest, I started watching and I've done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I found 10 possible clips. So it's really worth going and checking out for all the different questions and stuff that are in there. This is, and like, you might find a conversation and go, Pat, should I have shown this? I agree. I should have. We only got a certain amount of time. The part of the conversation, Chewie, they had about fast track consents and approvals, I thought was really interesting. It's about 3 minutes. Let us have a squiz at it.
One of the things that people are really concerned about is the new fast track legislation, the bill. And that'll put a lot of power in the hands of 3 ministers. And I see your faces popped up there, kind of a little bit muted.
Inset.
I think, have they mucked up the design, or are you just kind of like a little bit careful?
Had you not seen that?
I had not seen that, but I oh my God, that's fucking hell.
Yeah, because you don't want to give this minister, like, you don't want to give this minister the full amount of presence, literally in the background if you could. You know, we'll keep going.
They mucked up the design, or are you just kind of like a little bit careful there? What happens when, say, there's a push for permits and seabed mining? And Taranaki iwi have been, up in arms about that for many years.
Yes, my people.
Yeah. So what happens there?
Well, I think what you'll find is that over the last few years, a number of projects have really failed through RMA processes or conservation processes or other things. There's been a bit of bureaucratic molasses.
Now, the question is, if they've failed through the RMA process, does that mean there was good reason for them to fail? In other words, they could have been harmful to what they were trying to do, or have they failed purely because of bureaucracy and I dotting and T crossing? This is the question. Again, just like we were talking about earlier, why have they failed? Because if they've failed the RMA for bloody good reasons, in other words, reasons that would make the environment or where they're planning on being done less safe, then yes, they should fail. And if what you're saying now is you want to get rid of that, that means you're talking about unsafe practices that will now get through. It all comes down to the why. It all comes down to why did they fail? Did they fail for a good reason? Did they fail because of bureaucratic nonsense? You don't give us this part of the conversation, politicians, and we need to know it to need to be able to actually make an informed decision.
Describe it that way. So Ruakura in Hamilton East, the great city of Kirikiriroa, was a project that Tainui Group Holdings, the holding company for Waikato Tainui, was really pushing. And the council effectively said, well, hang on, that doesn't really suit the RMA and our needs. And so Tainui Group Holdings had to come to Wellington for 3 years, spent $3 million arguing for the Ruakura project to be put into the district plan. Now that's a great example where essentially the vitocracy has taken over. The bureaucratic molasses has made it harder for an iwi project to proceed.
That is a lot of power to leave in the hands of a very small group of ministers.
Yep.
Where are the checks and balances? Where is the compulsion to have iwi at the board, on the panels or anything like that? They're going to handpick whoever.
Well, I think there's a bit of water again to go under the bridge until we see the composition of the panels, but there are different stages, and I expect that both the conservation as well as iwi Māori interests are given elevation in these processes.
How much input have you had into this bill?
I've been involved in along with my office and the various agencies that are under my bailiwick, under my remit, in shaping and drafting and engaging on the appropriate wording for that bill.
So you're feeling confident that te tiriti rights and responsibilities of Māori and iwi, apart from treaty settlements, are not under threat?
Well, I'm feeling very confident that there is a pathway, a runway, a space for iwi to lead projects that seek consent and also be involved in projects.
So that seems to me what he's saying is, yeah, Māori can apply just like everybody else, which is a different question to what Moana is asking me. That's what I'm saying. He's basically saying, yeah, they can lead, they can apply just like everybody else. That's the summation of the feeling I've got from it. This has only got 12 seconds to go, then we'll cut him off.
Co-investors or maybe co-designers.
It's a different thing though.
No, I'm getting to that. Co-designers, and also to participate in projects that we are not investing in or investing through, but to have input, to have engagement through those processes.
There you go. So that's the 3 clips I'm going to show you. But yeah, so and as Moana pointed out, it was a different question. He was basically saying, of course Māori can be involved, where she was saying, as I understand it, it felt like she was saying, Māori have a special place in this planning process, thanks, because of te tiriti. So what about that part of it? And his response was, yeah, everyone can be involved, Māori as well. I'm paraphrasing. Chewie.
How much input do you have into this? Well, judging from my photo, about 20%.
But let me say this as well. The RMA stories, I'm sure that there are some cracker RMA stories out there where bureaucracy goes over the top. I always relate it back to a story, a SIFS story, that it used to be young people in families. SIFS, it's now whatever the name of it now is. Young people.
Oranga Tamariki.
Oranga Tamariki. It used to be SIFS. I had friends of mine who were farmers. Kids are bouncing off everything and climbing because they're farmers. And one of them fell off a trampoline and went to the hospital. Had a fracture in their arm and got posted up. Now this fracture, the doctor who saw the child sort of observed it as something that is often the kind of fracture an abused child gets, right? And so they had to notify SIFS. SIFS came out and did an investigation, which obviously was very stressful for the family, getting into their business, having to answer it. And then they deemed nothing was wrong and they went away. I remember talking to my friend about this who went through it. And I said to them, but think of the opposite. That seems to be the system working to me, because the doctor had a concern, nothing to do with you guys, was purely to do with what the fracture looked like. The doctor had to, by law, report it. They came out and they checked it out and they said nothing to see here. I know it would be stressful for anybody, but that to me is a system which causes you a headache, which causes you stress, which seems on some level you could go, oh, bureaucratic nonsense. Why did the doctor have to do? But it also then jumped through the hurdles to work. And the reason that was difficult, that they had to jump through the hurdles for it to work, was for the ones that don't work, jumping through the same hurdles would find them out. So whether the example he gave about the RMA was one of jumping through hurdles that they didn't need to, or the next application was going to be jumping through those hurdles to be found out, sometimes that's just how it has to go. Not giving the RMA a clean bill, not saying it's always fine. I'm just saying there's a system that sometimes is a headache, that sometimes feels bureaucratical, that sometimes feels like we're having to do these things we shouldn't have to, but they might not be about you. They might be about the person where they do have to do it. And sometimes on day one or on interaction one, you can't tell which is which. So you go through the process.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, let's not fuck around with this fast track bill. It's not for the benefit of Māori. It's not going to speed things up for iwi-based projects, because they aren't paying for the lobbyists.
Yeah.
They're not the big multinational mining corps that are wanting to drill a hole in our national parks or mine the seabed.
Straight through the seals. They want to actually literally drill through the seals into the seabed.
Those guys have been gunning for this for years and years and years. They have been talking to Christopher Bishop the entire time. They've been sharing friendly emails and congratulatory high fives and advice and that sort of thing. It is, as I have said before, corruption.